Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to have a look at another collaboration beer. So this one is half Scottish on the home side, half Welsh on the away side, and out of the two breweries involved in this one, both of them have featured on the channel many times before, albeit the Scottish brewery a little bit more frequently than the Welsh one. If people were to ask me about both of these breweries, I would say that they're best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, and they are among the best producers of these styles in their respective countries. Now, the beer we're going to have a look at today is one that is very highly regarded. It's a style that I know these breweries can do very, very well, and it is supposed to be a really nice example of that particular style. So yeah, needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for the home side of things then, as I say, we're going to stick to Scotland. We're going to go a little bit to the west of me here in Flintshire, over to Glasgow, to Yoker to be precise, and we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Overtone Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Splur. It comes in at 8% ABV, and this is another New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. But this has also been brewed in collaboration with Polly's Brewing Company from Mould in Flintshire in the north of Wales. So yeah, this should be pretty nice actually. This is part of a series of collaborations that were organised by Cloudwater as well, from what I understand, that they called the Mashup, and it's a fairly recent release from Overtone too. But yeah, definitely cool to have a look at my first collaboration between these two breweries, both very capable in that New England hazy category, as I've mentioned already. But yeah, let's crack on then and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about both the breweries involved here before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Overtone Brewing Company before, and my other reviews as well that I've done from Polly's Brewing Company too. You will no doubt see more added to both of those lists at some point in the near future, but there's all the usual social media down there as well. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go down there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, of course, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this beer in the playlist for both Scotland and Wales because it is dual nationality, and we will be adding more to those lists as time goes on. And check out the list of beers from other countries as well, because there's some really good stuff all across the European continent and further afield these days. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit once again about the breweries. We'll start with Overtone Brewing, since they are the home brewery in this case. So Overtone Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Glasgow, and the company was founded back in 2017 by Bo Wei Wang, who is originally from Beijing in China. So he had been a home brewer for a number of years before founding the company, and the name Overtone is taken from his love of techno music, and this is why on the Overtone cans you very often get these kind of round all things that are sort of like the kind of electronic patterns you'll see at techno concerts and stuff like this. I know that Peter, the Clueless Drinker, is a massive fan of the Overtone artwork. But in the early days, Bo Wei hired Dan Miller, who's from New Hampshire over in New England in the northeastern US, to come in as his head brewer, and he'd previously worked as a head chef but also as a brewer in England, New York, and he worked in Scotland too for 6 Degrees North, who do some very nice Belgian style beers incidentally. But also involved in the brewery side of things is Martin Conahan. He had worked in the craft beer scene down in New Zealand for a number of years. He does do a little bit of brewing, but I believe these days he's working more in the kind of back office side of stuff with the company. But these days Charlie Irving is also involved in the brewing, and he comes from a background of home brewing and also having previously worked for another local brewery through in Glasgow. But the brewery itself can be found in the New Albion Industrial Estate in Yoker near Renfrew and Clydebank, and they began their operations there back in 2018. These guys don't have a fixed range, if you like, but they're always producing new beers They do have a few that come out regularly, of course. The Ouija Pale Ale seems to be a regular one these days, but they are the first brewery in Scotland that really focused on the New England Hazy as their core style, and that's really kind of what got them the fame that they have these days. And it really kicked off when their beers went away down into England and people discovered them there, and that was when the whole Overtone hype train kind of started, I would say. But over the years they've continued to expand the brewery and build up their capacity, and as of July 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 160 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. Mainly it's New England Hazy IPAs, but they do a few lagers every so often. I've seen 1 or 2 wheat beers from them. There's been a good few West Coast IPAs, and they do have a number of Imperial Stouts these days, and a couple of barrel-aged things too. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Overtone Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and move down to Wales for these kind of things. So yeah, Polly's Brewing Company then. So like I mentioned to you earlier, Polly's Brewing Company is based in Mold in Flintshire in the north of Wales, pretty much right across the border from Liverpool in England, and this company is run by 3 friends. This is Aaron Fellows, Sean Weldon and Scott Nixon, and the company was founded in early 2018 as Loka Polly. So Sean had a brewery previously that was known as Black Brook Brewing, and this ran for about 18 months, but he realised he couldn't brew the beers that he wanted for cask conditioning, and so he decided to dissolve Black Brook and completely rebrand as Loka Polly. But the idea for the name Loka Polly came in 2 parts. Loka coming from his brother James's graphic design project that was called Loka Island, and then Polly coming from their horse, who used to live in the barn where the brewery is now located. But Aaron had been running a restaurant and a bar and had become known as the beer guy, and used to buy Sean's beer when he worked at a local wine and tapas bar. But he was approached later by Sean to come in as the head of sales, and he deals a lot with the business side of the brewery while Sean concentrates on the brewing. But Scott joined the brewery a little bit later on in August of 2018, having been a long-term friend, and he is also involved in the brewing side of things as well. But in early 2019 they received a cease and desist letter from Loka, who are a Swedish soft drinks producer. They produce flavoured waters and things like this, and these guys are part of the Spendrups Brewery, and so they changed their name at this point to Polly's Brewing Company because they felt, you know, there's no point kind of going through the legal battle and stuff like this, so they changed the name simply to Polly's. But at the moment these guys have been focusing mainly on IPAs and pale ales and stuff like this, and they do produce other styles a little bit sporadically too. But as of July 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced a number of different beers. It comes in at 615 according to Untappd. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Polly's Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, again, you can check out the brewery website, follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and have a little look at the beer itself. So yeah, from what I understand, this one, Splur, it is meant to be a kind of combination of the recipes for Polly Brewing Company's Spur, from what I understand, and I'm not sure exactly which Overtone one it's supposed to be crossed with actually, but I think it could well be the Chur or something like that, Churcuz, I'm not sure. But yeah, it is supposed to be a combination of a recipe from Overtone Brewing and from Polly's Brewing Company, and as I say, this was produced as part of the kind of mashup collaboration that was organised by Cloudwater in Manchester. But yeah, I'll just let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. You can see it's an 8% New England double IPA, as we mentioned earlier, but the kind of teardrop, water droplet, or however you want to call it, shape in this one, that is to represent Polly's, and you can see the sort of techno pattern behind that. That is typical Overtone. But yeah, plain silver top on the can there, as you can see. I can't remember exactly what I paid for this one, to be honest with you. But yeah, the hops in this beer are Galaxy, Simcoe, Simcoe Cryo, Chinook, Citra, Citra Cryo, and Azaka. These are all American hops, and we know them quite well. Apart from Galaxy, of course, Galaxy is Australian. So Galaxy, 14% alpha acid. It's going to give you a lovely kind of pungent passion fruit, a lot of mango, good little bit of pineapple. Simcoe is going to give you about, you know, it's about 12% alpha acid, and it's going to give you this lovely soft passion fruit. Chinook is about 14% alpha acid, if I'm not mistaken, and that gives you a big kind of piney resin and a good little bit of grapefruit. Citra, big juicy mango notes, but also a little bit of a lemon limey character. And Azaka is going to give you quite a bright orange, but also a good little bit of pineapple and things in behind it. So yeah, you've got 8% ABV with this one, as we've said, and it's inspired, it tells you on the back, you're a double dry hop double IPA inspired by Splur, which is from Polly's, and Plur, I guess, from Overtone. So yeah, it says the mashup is a project brought to you by Cloudwater, inspired by our love of musical mashups. It sees 8 of the UK's best breweries pair up to create collaborations based on some of their best loved recipes, each accompanied by a joint playlist. So yeah, they've got Cloudwater and Beak, Verdant and Rivington, Polly's and Overtone, and Siren and New Barns. Yeah, I need to see if I can get that Siren and New Barns one. That could be really interesting. I'm guessing the Siren and New Barns one's probably going to be a big imperial, something to do with a porter or whatever. The plain dark beer from New Barns is probably their most well-known one. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass then and see what it's all about. I will need to see about trying to find that New Barns one. I love New Barns Brewery, of course. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and just see what it's all about. This is one I've been looking forward to trying. But yeah, we've got most of the beer out and into the glass at that point. There's just a little bit left in it there. So anyway, you can see that this beer's poured pretty much as you would expect of any New England IPA. So before the head disappears, we can say that this one has come out with about a half finger of a frothy, I would say, kind of cream coloured head. You've got one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass. There are a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head, but overall it does look pretty nice actually. Yeah, in terms of the colour, I always like comparing these New England IPAs to different fruit juices. This is very much like a kind of bright mango juice. You can see the lovely sort of bright yellow colour that this one has. So yeah, it looks absolutely great. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort ball is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour too, but yeah, you don't often have to care about that when it comes to different New England IPAs and so on, or any kind of IPA apart from fruit IPAs, to be honest with you. But yeah, I do have to say, the level of haze in this one for an 8% is pretty impressive actually. It's certainly one of the soupier and gloopier ones that I've come across in recent times. But remember, with New England IPAs, the level of haze depends on the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree what yeast you use. This can vary from brewery to brewery and even recipe to recipe. So yeah, this is pretty impressive in this one, I have to say. I do think it looks very, very nice. But other than that, I don't know if we really need to say anything more about the appearance. The head has faded away to be a thin foamy layer with a nice ring around the edge of the glass. But yeah, this looks exactly as you'd expect from a New England IPA of any description. So yeah, let's have a wee look at the aroma of this one then and see what it's all about. I'm really curious about this beer. Oh, that does smell really nice. Yeah, straight away I can say this beer gives you everything you'd expect of the style. So yeah, for me this is quite an oaty, and it's quite an oaty, creamy leaning New England IPA, to be honest with you. You've got a lovely little bit of bright floral character coming out of this one, and really soft, juicy, fruity notes, which I think are great. But yeah, for me, as I've said in many reviews before, the New England IPA can lean a few different ways when it comes to the malty and yeasty side of things. There's 6, can't do my hands these days, but 6 elements that you can think about here. So you've got the sort of farmhousey and yeasty side of things, you've got the rye leaning grainy side of things too. Those two components are a little bit more prominent in American brewed New England IPAs, but then you've also got wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and also the kind of sweeter side of things too. And those, of course, are more common in the European side of things. But yeah, you know, you've got some of originally the New England IPA was quite a farmhousey beer. If you're thinking Lawson's Finest Liquids, Sean Hill Farmstead, and Alchemist Brewing would be very prime examples of that. But yeah, the European take on this style has developed a little bit more along the lines of Treehouse and Trillium, the sort of oaty and wheaty side of things, and you can definitely smell that influence in this beer. I'm sure we'll get that in the taste too. But yeah, a lovely smelling beer, I have to say. Very smooth, creamy and quite juicy New England IPA. Let's just break the aroma of this one down a little bit and describe the flavour a bit more in depth for you. So yeah, the backbone of this beer for me, it's yeah, the backbone of the beer for me, it's got a lovely sort of kind of fresh white bready bread crust. I quite often get this in the New England IPAs. Lovely fresh white bready bread crust, almost like it still has a little touch of flour on it, which is really quite interesting. So a lovely kind of soft flour, fresh white bready bread crust in there. There's a little touch of woody character to it, and you've also got some nice kind of crackery notes coming out of the beer as well, which I think are really great. I really do like how that pieces together in this one. Yeah. So on that note, I would say that on top of that, and I will say this beer gets a little bit more kind of floral and aromatic the more that you smell of it, in fairness. But above the kind of bread crust and the cracker and the very slight woody character, you get a lovely kind of soft, fluffy, white bready note out of this one, which is great too. At the back of the nose in this one, you do get a little bit of a kind of wheaty bitiness in there, and I think that gets a little bit more prominent the more that you smell of this beer too. So yeah, the way that goes together is really very nice. You do get more and more wheat out of this one as your nose adjusts to it. But yeah, you can smell the wheat in there. It's quite a smooth wheaty character with a little bit of bitiness at the back of the nose, and then you get a lot of the oaty creaminess coming out on top of that. Yeah, the oaty creaminess that comes out of this one is is great. It smells very fresh as well. As I've said, the oaty character in these New England IPAs can often be used as an indicator of how fresh the beer is. Essentially, the creamier the oats smell, the fresher the beer is. The drier the oats are, the older the beer is. Actually, that tends to be how it goes. So yeah, lots of nice oaty creaminess in this one, and you do have a very slight touch of kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy character coming out of this beer. But you know, that's quite common with the style too. I do just get that little bit of sweetness in the middle of the nose here. But I think that covers everything we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of this beer, to be quite honest with you. In terms of the green component, it is kind of what you'd expect. There's a little touch of earthiness in there, nice bright floral aromaticity, and you've also got a good little bit of kind of zesty, grassy character coming out of the beer too. But yeah, very bright in its green component, I would say. And as I've said in New England reviews before, there are 3 different kinds of hoppings you can use when it comes to IPAs. Early edition hopping takes place within the first hour of the wort boil. That gives you mainly bitterness and translates to a deeper, danker flavour and aroma. Late edition hopping within the last half hour of the wort boil, that gives you mainly kind of floral and bright floral and grassy sort of components in terms of flavour and aroma, but that gives you a little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma, as I say. Then dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete, that gives you pretty much all flavour and aroma, and it contributes to quite a bright green component, I would say. New England IPAs tend to rely on late edition and dry hopping. West Coast IPAs use all 3, but early edition hopping dominates really over late and dry hopping in my experience. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that sense is really very nice and very lovely, bright kind of floral component to a nice zesty, grassy character. Yeah, I really like how this beer goes together actually. Yeah, awesome stuff. So In terms of the fruity side of things, if you know the hops in this one, it's not really a surprise. It is mainly a kind of tropical, fruity leaning, New England. You've got a good little bit of passion fruit in this one. Absolutely lovely bit of kind of juicy passion fruit in there. Big ripe and juicy mango as well. I'm getting quite a lot of pineapple. That's going to come from the Azaka and from the Galaxy in this one. The mango's going to come from Galaxy and Citra, to be honest with you. I think the Simcoe's going to give you the kind of juicy passion fruit as well. But underneath that, there's a little bit of apricot and papaya, these kind of notes. But I'm also getting like a soft. I'm also getting quite a soft. I would say, yeah, I'm getting quite a little bit of a soft sort of tangerine apricot, note from the Azaka. But mainly, yeah, lots of soft tropical fruit in this one. And then, yeah, some nice, as I say, some really nice, just juicy tangerine orangey characters coming out of this beer. So, yeah, it gets a thumbs up from me in that particular regard. So, yeah, beautiful aroma this one, but knowing these two breweries, I'm not really surprised. As I always say though, take a little bit of time to ponder over the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into this one. But I think it is about time to try this. So this is the Splur, a collaboration as part of Cloudwater's mashup project between Overtone Brewing Company on the home side from Glasgow in Scotland and Polly's Brewing Company from Mold in the north of Wales. Let's get stuck into this one. Sláinte, skål, cheers. Yeah. Big, smooth, creamy New England IPA. Really nice stuff actually. It feels like a wee while at this point in my reviewing since I've sat down and had a double IPA. I think since I've come home, Overtone have been firing out a lot of triple IPAs, and it's been those that I've been trying. They've been really good actually. But yeah, to go back to a double IPA at this point is quite interesting. But yeah, it's a really solid beer, this one, and considering the two breweries involved, I wouldn't expect anything less to be quite honest with you. This is really nicely done, as I was expecting from the aroma. Very oaty, kind of creamy leaning New England IPA, but really nicely done. So big, my hat comes off to these breweries, I should say. So yeah. Let's start off in the middle third of the palate with this beer, as we often do. But yeah, big, soft, creamy, oaty leaning New England IPA, that middle third of the palate then. The backbone of the beer, you've got that lovely kind of fresh white bready character just forming the back of the beer. It feels like it's fresh out of the bakery, a little bit of flour stuck to it and everything. Further forward on that middle third of your palate, you've got a little touch of a woody note coming out of it, and as I say, that's absolutely great too. So yeah, for me, on top of the kind of bread crust and the little woody note, you do get a little bit of a kind of Jacob's cream crackery character coming out of this beer. It shows its head a little bit more the further into the aftertaste that you go. But again, I do really like how that goes together. On top of that though, you get a kind of fluffy and airy, fresh white bready character out of this one. You can feel that just in the middle of your palate, and it goes together really nicely. Above that layer, you start to get a more dense, wheaty character out of this one. You can feel the wheat just densifying out the top of that white bready layer, which is great. So, yeah, the dense wheaty layer that is on top of there, it's kind of smooth actually. It changes a little bit as you go into the back third of the palate, but then above the kind of denser wheaty layer, you do start to get a good little bit of the oaty kind of creaminess out of the beer. What I'd also say about this one is that it's certainly not the sweetest of New England doubles that I've come across in my time, but I think I do have to say I think it goes together really quite nicely. On the, yeah, in that regard, it's quite, it really is quite, it really is very smooth and creamy New England IPA. But on the oaty side of things, it's interesting because as you go down the middle line of your palate, you can feel it's got a really lovely kind of creamy oaty character coming out of it. Then as you move over toward the edges of your palate, I think you can feel the oaty character just dries out a little bit. So yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is really quite nice as well. So for me, the nice kind of creamy oaty character that you get down the middle line of your palate is it really lingers there into the aftertaste. It's great, and as you move out toward the edges of the palate, it stays quite creamy, and it just gets that little touch drier. And as I say, that's usually an indicator that your New England IPA is very, very fresh. And this is, at the time of filming, this one is a very recent release, so that's not a surprise. In the dead centre of your palate, though, you can just feel that little circle there, where you get a wee bit of a kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type note coming out of the beer, but that's not overly prominent, I would say. So yeah, I do like how this pieces together. So yeah, I think that covers everything we need to say about the middle third of your palate in this beer. It does go together really, really nicely. A very smooth, creamy and oaty leaning New England IPA. So yeah, let's move on to the other. Yeah, let's move on to the other parts of the palate then. So back third of your palate. As I've said, the back third of your palate tends to give you very similar flavours to the middle third of your palate. They just come out at different intensities, but do remember that general trend with your palate that sweeter flavours come out further forward and the more dry and bitter flavours come out further back. So yeah, border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build-up in there, soft white bread underneath, and it does get a little bit lighter and more airy the further up that you go. But on the back third of your palate, you've got the bread crust that we talked about earlier, which feels a little bit drier. It's got a wee touch of a crackery note above it. There's a kind of wholemeal brown bready character, a very slight wholemeal brown bready character there, which feels a little bit light and airy. But then above that, it's all about that fluffy white bready character, and it feels really quite light and airy. But above all of that, you can feel some of the wheaty character just creeping over the top. It's got a little touch of kind of bitiness to it in that regard, which is nice. And yeah, I think that that does go together really, really quite nicely. You get that lovely little bit of wheaty bitiness there, and then some yeasty characteristics sitting above that. So yeah, it goes together really nicely in that sense. So, yeah, the yeast, above the kind of the little bit of wheaty bitiness that you get further into the aftertaste, as I say, above all of that, you do get a little touch of a kind of yeasty character coming out of this one, and it feels like a nice kind of a slightly more dense white bready character. It's got a little bit of that kind of farmhousey bread to it, a little bit of cracker, a little bit of wood, and as I say, that just sits above everything else on the it sits above everything else on that back third of your palate. But you can definitely feel that the flavour is taller on the back third of your palate. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is really, really quite nice. In terms of the hoppy side of things then with this beer, I think we've said everything we need to about the malty and yeasty side of the beer. Start with the green component then. In the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little touch of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, you get a little bit of herbal character, but then as you move further forward, you can feel you get that more oily sort of floral aromaticity with this one. With the presence of Chinook, you might actually expect a little bit more kind of dankness and pine resin, but you don't get too much of that in this beer. You can feel it on the side of your palate, certainly, but it feels like a more oily sort of floral character that comes out of this one. But round the front curve of the tongue, the beer is definitely a little bit lighter and more grassy for sure. And I think that goes together very, very nicely. So, yeah, it's great, this one, as I say, a nice kind of oily floral aromatic thing, then a nice lighter kind of grassy note coming out of the beer, but quite a wet and oily grassy note. As I say, the green component of this beer is really nice, but as you typically get with the use of cryo oils, it feels quite oily for me, but I like that. It gets a little bit more bitter the further into the aftertaste that you go. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the green component. Let's focus on that front third of your palate and the fruity side of things then. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build-up in this one. Wee bit of kind of brown bread in the base and a softer white bread above that. The base of that front third of your palate, you've got a nice kind of, you have got a little bit of a bread crusty base to that. You do get a little bit of, you do get quite a little bit of fluffy white bread in there, and then you can feel some of the oaty smoothness there just densifying out, but then you've got that lovely oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And the fruity side of this beer is kind of what you would expect when you consider what hops are involved. So let's look at that fruity side of things just to round off the tasting part of the video. So, at the back of that front third of your palate, yeah, it's a lovely, soft and juicy passion fruit, which is going to come from the Citra, the Galaxy, and the Simcoe in this one. They're all going to give you a little bit of that. There's not really a big grapefruity presence to this one, which you might have expected from the presence of Chinook. I really feel that Chinook takes a bit of a back seat in this beer, to be honest with you. You do get a very slight touch of it the further into the aftertaste you go, but yeah, as I say, it's almost negligible. But yeah, soft, juicy passion fruit there. As you move further forward, you have a very, very nice, you do have a very nice, oily, juicy, fruity character to this one. It's a big, juicy, mangoey note that comes out of this beer. And then as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, you have a little touch of dry apricot underneath, and big, juicy, kind of pineapple-y notes on top of that. Yeah, I think it goes together really very, very nicely. As you move further forward in this one, into that front half of the front third of your palate, you can feel it almost gets a little bit apricot and papaya underneath, but you do have a little touch of a sort of tangerine-y, yeah, you've got a little bit of a sort of tangerine-y, mandarin-y type quality coming out of this one. So yeah, that is really nice in this beer too. So, in terms of the, as I say, in terms of the front half of that front third of your palate, it's, the orangey character comes out a little bit more the further into the aftertaste that you go to, and that is really nice. But like I say, a very tropical leaning New England IPA, I would say. Yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the fruity side of things, to be honest with you. But as I say, generally speaking, this is a very creamy and oaty, smooth, tropical, fruity New England IPA. I think that's a good summary of this one, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think we can round off now and have a wee look at the mouthfeel. For me, this beer, it's kind of pushing toward the top end of mid-bodied for me. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It's got quite a clean mouthfeel to it. You can feel the cleanliness of the Scottish water in this one. We're very proud of our tap water up here, of course. But yeah, you do also have a nice little bit of creaminess to the beer at the same time. It's quite clean but quite smooth and creamy. I think that's a fair descriptor of this one. IBU wise, I think this is a fairly standard 30-ish IBU that I'm getting out of this one. I'd say it doesn't strike me as being unusual in that particular regard. That's definitely fair to say. But then yeah, you've got a lovely, in the malt base, you've got a bit of dryness underneath, a smoothness in the middle, a sweet, very slight sweet character on top of it, big juicy fruits. But yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is really very nice. It's a lovely New England double, this one. It feels like a while since I've done a double. I've been having quite a few triples in recent times, just, you know, gorging myself on Overtone when I come back to the motherland. But yeah, this is a really, really nice beer, and it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This was the Splur, a New England hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA, brewed at Overtone Brewing Company in Yoker in Glasgow, in collaboration with Polly's Brewing Company, who are from Mold in Flintshire in the very north of Wales. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from both Overtone and Polly's, and we will see about returning to these guys again in the very near future. But until then, Slàinte, Skål, cheers, check out my social media, check out the brewery social media, and I'll see you guys again soon. Slàinte, Skål, and cheers.